Donald Trump said the US was not responsible for a missile that targeted a girls' school in Iran, killing over 175 people, including dozens of schoolgirls aged 7 to 12. But new evidence reviewed by outlets like Bellingcat and the New York Times shows that that was a US missile. Trump's story in Iran is already falling apart, and there was never any real justification for starting this conflict, which is also seeing oil prices soaring, continued destabilization in the region, and potential retaliatory threats at home in the US. On February 28th, the US and Israel initiated a war in Iran. They called that first night of strikes Operation Epic Fury, but they claimed they weren't responsible for a missile that hit a girls' school, killing dozens of children. However, new evidence and forensic reporting shows that it most likely was a US missile. In fact, that's one of the only explanations for where this missile could have come from. Investigative outlet Bellingcat geolocated this footage that was originally shared by Mer News in the region. This is what it looks like. In the footage, you see a missile being dropped on a military target and a large plume of black smoke emanating from where it struck. In the map of the fallout, you can see this red cone of impact sketched out by Bellingcat, and here's the elementary school right next to where the missile landed. As we can see in that footage, the missile that was dropped was a tomahawk, a type of weapon that only the United States has, not Israel or Iran. So, this directly contradicts the narrative that Iran had dropped a missile on its own civilians. It suggests that the US was responsible for this war crime. The New York Times reported the same thing. And when they reached Trump for comment, he said, "No, in my opinion, and based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran." He said, they're very inaccurate with their munitions. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the only side that targets civilians is Iran. This is the narrative that the US government wants you to believe, but it's not true based on all of the evidence we have. And according to international experts, this could absolutely constitute a war crime. Speaking to USA Today, David Sheffer, an international law expert who served as the first US ambassador at large for war crimes issues, said, "It would be difficult to establish a lawful basis for the strike on the school building at a time when it is full of children. It likely is a mistaken targeting decision or based on flawed intelligence about the use of that building. But whether it was a mistake or a malicious attempt, the end result is hundreds of dead children. And if it was a mistake, the culprit could very well be artificial intelligence, since sources told Axios and the Wall Street Journal that the US military was using the AI chatbot Claude in Operation Epic Fury." This story sounds all too familiar. It's extremely reminiscent of what Israel said about its attacks on Gaza in the days, weeks, months, and years following the October 7th, 2023 terrorist attack. Israel repeatedly claimed that it was not responsible for bombing schools and hospitals until it became obvious that they were. But by that point, people had moved on. Now, with the US and Israel starting war in Iran with no end in sight, people who look at things like global market analysis might be hoping this is something we can move on from quickly, but that doesn't seem to be the case. For starters, the Daily Mail reported that the White House has blocked an intelligence report from circulating that warned of rising US homeland terror threats linked to this war. Specifically, the Daily Mail reported that the FBI, Homeland Security, and the National Counterterrorism Center were preparing to put out a joint intelligence statement this past Friday, alerting state and local authorities of a heightened threat due to this ongoing war. The Daily Mail reviewed that bulletin, which specifically detailed elevated threats by the government of Iran to US military and government personnel and facilities, Jewish and Israeli institutions and their perceived supporters, as well as Iranian dissidents and other anti regime activists in the United States. These are some of the people who have actually thrown support behind Trump's invasion of Iran, Now their safety is at risk, and Trump doesn't even want them to know. Because according to the Daily Mail, the White House blocked this 5-page bulletin from being sent out to local and regional authorities. They started a war that they couldn't finish. They killed a leader who they couldn't replace. Over 1,000 lives have already been lost, and they can't come back. But Trump doesn't want you to know about that. He's terrified of his popularity continuing to plummet, in part because gas prices are going to soar as a result of this conflict. It's already happening. Over the weekend, Israel and the US commenced even more strikes targeting oil reserves and facilities in Iran. Here's a clip from the ground of what that scene looks like.
سلام خدمت بینندگان عزیز. مردم وقتی که میگه من فقط زیرساخت نظامی میزنم، اینجا محل پخش بنزین شمال شرق و شرق تهرانه. بنزین رو وقتی میزنه میخواد شما مردم اذیت بشید، میخواد کارهای نظامی نیست. بنزین برای مردمه، بنزین برای اینه که ماشین‌های شما، ماشین‌های امدادی و آمبولانس‌های شما راحت در شهر بچرخه.
Pure hellfire in the skies behind that journalist on the ground in Iran. Obviously, this impact is going to be long lasting, and Americans will feel the consequences, as well as the people in Iran whose lives are actively threatened by our military right now. Petroleum analyst Patrick DeHaan posted on Blue Sky that we're in uncharted territory. If these numbers hold, he said this would be the largest single day price jump in both percent and amount for crude oil ever. Ever. Ever, he emphasized in all caps. Economist Justin Wolfers shared this scary looking chart and said markets are very unhappy about developments in Iran. This is the Sunday evening futures trading charts, which shows stocks are sharply down as a result of this conflict. And then Rachel Maddow posted a very scary chart going in the opposite direction, which is oil prices currently barreling toward all-time highs. Now, host Maddow says the president has no idea what he has set in motion. None. Part of the problem is that the Strait of Hormuz, this waterway bordered by Iran, is currently closed. And this is one of the most vital waterways in the world for our oil ecosystem. The Wall Street Journal is calling this the most severe energy crisis since the 1970s, with the headline, "The long-feared Persian Gulf oil squeeze is upon us." And we have this quote pulled out from JP Morgan Chase analyst Natasha Kaneva. She said, "In the whole written history of the strait, it has never been closed, ever." To me, it was not just the worst case scenario. It was an unthinkable scenario. The thing is, Trump, of all people, is obsessed with oil and gas prices. He rarely knows what they actually are and just throws up made up numbers at events and conferences. But nonetheless, he knows that when that line goes up, his approval goes down, and Americans are not happy. But he might not have any clue just how bad it's going to get as a result of his decision making. And Trump claims now on Truth Social that a little bit of market turbulence is worth it in exchange for peace and security in the Middle East. But we didn't get peace, security, or stability in the Middle East. He actually set it up for an even more brutal regime to take its place. As the podcaster and comic Juniper put it, the destruction of the entire world's economy is a small price to pay for the massive victory of the son of the guy America assassinated to take over as leader. Or as author Kashana Cauley put it, people are so upset about the price of gas, as if you can't just run a car on racial slurs. The analysts and the financial institutions are freaking out. As Bank of America's securities head of US equity and quantitative strategy put it, "We thought the administration was going to be focused on affordability and quelling inflation. And that seems to be the opposite of what's actually happening." Gee, I wonder who could have predicted that Trump would do the opposite of what he said. I wonder if anyone predicted that having Trump retake the presidency would be bad for America and the rest of the world. Bad for our economy, bad for our security, bad for the lives of thousands of innocent people around the globe. I wonder Who on earth could have seen this coming? Sarcasm, if you didn't detect that. And what does Trump have to say for himself at this stage? Well, over on Truth Social, he's posting screenshots of blue check Twitter accounts that might not even be real, saying this is all by design to make POTUS and Republicans look bad for the midterm elections. But whose designs are they? Because this is all on Trump and his administration and his party. They're the ones in charge. They have control of the branches of government, and they are the ultimate decision makers with this war. They can't blame anyone else this time. This was all Trump's doing. He is the one who started this war. And all of the consequences that come from that, it's his fault and his responsibility. But again, none of this should come as a surprise because there was never any real reason for starting this conflict in the first place. Judd Legume, the journalist behind Popular Information, posted 9 days in, the most basic questions about the Iran war remain unanswered. In just over a week, Trump and his top administration officials have given at least 17 different conflicting responses about why the war began. Just a few of those contradictions include that Trump said they obliterated Iran's nuclear program last year. But now they're starting this war because Iran supposedly has the capabilities to build a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks. That doesn't make any sense. Those ideas clearly contradict each other. Another reason thrown out by the Trump administration is that Iran has too much control over the global oil supply. But also, the US started the war because it knew Israel was going to attack Iran and endanger our troops. But also, it did not start the war because it knew Israel was going to attack Iran. And also, Trump was the one who pushed Israel to join an attack on Iran because he believed Iran would otherwise attack first. According to Pete Hegseth, the US attacked Iran because Iran is the weakest they've ever been. But at the exact same time, they're building both long range and short range missiles that could target and kill Americans. And their nuclear weapons are the real problem here. And also, the war is apparently personal for Trump, personal payback, and his feelings based on facts, not just vibes, facts that Iran poses an immediate and direct threat to the US. And those are just some of the reasons they've thrown out there, all of which ultimately contradict each other. The truth is, the US executive branch under Trump's lead has no idea what it's doing. It's total chaos right now. And for someone who wants to win the midterms so badly, this is perhaps the worst thing Trump could have done. This war started out unpopular among Americans, and wars don't become more popular over time. They only get less and less popular. And if Americans think the war is a problem now, if Americans are rightfully horrified by the killing of dozens of Iranian schoolgirls, well, Americans certainly aren't going to like it when their gas prices go up. Because if this is an administration focused on affordability, then it's failed on all fronts. But we already knew Trump was going to fail because he's never been a winner. He's always been a liar, a scammer, and ultimately a massive threat to the security of not just the American people, but everyone, everywhere, all around the globe.